Hi, how's it going? I'm Marlene, and thanks for wandering by. Tonight, I wanted to talk to you about the idea of an inner teenager. And I thought of this because of several different things that happened to line up recently that I was watching on YouTube. So first of all, welcome back to my channel if you've been here before, and welcome to anybody that's new. I'm Marlene. I'm a poet and a tarot reader, and I make content that is mostly centered around the tarot and my journey as I've been learning and reading the tarot, plus kind of melding the tarot with creative writing, among some other things that might just occur to me to talk about. But anyway, tonight, the idea that I had and wanted to discuss is inner teenager. What is an inner teenager? How can we use the tarot to speak to our inner teenager? And also, what decks might we already have that experience with? So let me first back up and tell you how I arrived here. So several different things lined up that kind of just made me think about this. First of all, Mags Black, and I'll link to her channel in the description box below. Mags Black did a amazing tag called 90s Vibes, or Tarot with 90s Vibes. I'll have that correct down below for you. But it was so cool. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I was a child of the 80s and a teenager in the 90s. So her video was full of nostalgia. I loved it so much. And I wanted to do that tag as well, but I couldn't really think of or find decks that really had like 90s aesthetic vibes for me. I might consider this, she might, consider this, or I might consider this a tag in response to her, just because the decks I'm going to show you have the feeling of myself in the 90s, not necessarily their specific aesthetic. Doesn't scream 90s, style or 90s vibes. But anyway, so that was the first thing that I saw. Secondly, Lisa Pepez, who's amazing, and I'm sure most of you that are here have wandered by because you found me through my buddy Lisa. But she just recently did in her series, I don't know if this was now, I don't know if it was for the public channel or for the membership. But anyway, she did a video on an inner child reading. So how to connect with your inner child. And she did a tarot spread specifically for the inner child. And it was awesome. And if it is on her public channel, which I'm pretty sure it is, I will link it below. If it's not, then you need to think about joining the Unicorn Fam. That's her membership. Okay, anyway, so that happened, and I was thinking about, I had already been thinking about inner child work, but I was also thinking about so her inner child reading, to make this all connect for you and for myself, her inner child tarot spread made me think about how the voice of my inner child is a hard one for me to connect with. And I've been working on that, and I have a video, and I'll link that in the cards above. What inner child work is to me, because I'm still exploring that, because that voice doesn't really talk loudly to me when I'm seeking it, even when I'm seeking it. So the voice that does speak to me is my inner teenager. And so that was something that became clear to me as I was, working with the spread that Lisa had created, and that I wanted to try out with inner child. So that was the other thing. And then finally, Kellyanne Maddox, who, if you don't know who Kellyanne Maddox is, I don't know where you've been. But she is like an OG tarot reader, and has a channel very much around all things witchcraft, witchy, tarot, I mean, spirituality. Like, she's awesome. She has a book. I mean, like, honestly, I don't know why I'm telling you all this, because I feel like you've got to know who Kellyanne Maddox is. She's brilliant, and I really, really love all her content, and I've been watching her for over the past year now too. And she's just like cool, you know. But anyway, recently made a video about her current witchcraft practice, and the title was, you know, what would my inner teenager think about what I'm doing now, and how would my teenage self respond to like the adult that she is, and her current practice, and the things that she's, you know, doing today. What would her inner you know, her teenage self think to that? And that is something that I talk about with my one of my best friends all the time, about like what would our teenage selves think about the, you know, who we are and how we are now. It's just, I mean, the voice of my inner teenager is loud for me. Like, I connect with her. You know, I mean, I know it's obviously not as far removed necessarily as an inner child, but I don't know. I mean, some people might have a better time connecting with and memories and things from their childhood than they necessarily do from, you know, their teenage years. But for me, my inner teenager is a loud voice. So what I wanted to do in terms of inner teenagers, first talk about what I think the difference is between an inner child and an inner teenager. And I think it's a little bit more than just like, oh, the voice of myself as a child, or oh, the voice of myself as a teenager. Because I think it's important to talk about like the specific, like different like developmental stages of a person from childhood versus from, you know, from adolescence and being a teenager. For me, you know, and I'll just talk about because there's a lot of levels of development from childhood. But for me, like, your stages of development as a teenager, have so much to do with like your processing your identity. And so like you do get a sense of self-awareness as a child. It's usually around like age 7 when you kind of recognize yourself in like as other, you know, like you recognize, I have an awareness of yourself in the world. Typically at age 7 is, you know, around that age is when that starts to kind of come out. But it's really through, you know, your teenage years that you develop a sense of identity, and you spend like your preteen years kind of like trying to really figure out, you know, you're really trying to fit in. So like, so, you know, when you're 13, still coming out of middle school, at least here in the States, you know, you go, middle school is ages 11 through 13, and then high school is ages 14 through 17 or 18, typically. And so in middle school is when you're like really trying to fit in, really trying to find a friend group that you fit in with, really just trying to like, I don't know, understand, you know, how everything works and your place in it. But it's when you're a teenager that you really develop like your sense of identity, your sense of self, and like own it. I mean, you know, of course there's a lot of stumbling blocks and things along the way that many teenagers, you know, myself included, go through. But I really feel like it's a really huge growing time to explore, to rebel, to question. And, you know, I was a teenager in the 90s, so there was a hell of a lot of, of like rebellion in the Gen X way, which was like Nirvana and like, you know, Damn the Man and like stuff like that. Anyway, that, you know, that's like my specific 90s experience as a teenager. But I just feel like, so in exploring and listening to the voice of my inner teenager through the tarot, when I like tap into that, it's really a cool way for me to connect with who I thought I wanted to be as an adult and like what I was trying to learn and cultivate like as a teenager to like develop this sense of identity of who I am. And I've always struggled with my sense of identity. So there were pockets of time when I was a teenager that I really felt like solid in some values and some beliefs and some like identity markers for myself. So I like to hear from that past voice when I'm considering things in my life today, because I think she was really like, she had some really definite, my teenage self, she had some really definite ideas about who I was at that time. And that's cool. So that for me is what really distinguishes, you know, an inner teenager voice from an inner child. And not to say that there's not shadow stuff in there or trauma work that someone could do through childhood or you know, teenage years or whatever it may be that you might personally want to like connect with in that space. But for me, what an inner teenager and developing and working with that has really, I think, helped me embrace confidence and things like that. So I wanted to show you just a few decks that I feel like speak very loudly from the voice of my inner teenager, help me connect with my inner teenager. So yeah, so let me start with the number one. So my number one choice here is the Outgrow Yourself Tarot and Oracle. Link everything below though. So these are the backs of the cards. And the Outgrow Yourself, so first of all, this is a Thoth-based deck, and it can be used as either a tarot or an oracle deck. So I love this deck for so many different reasons. Number one, because it connected my group of tarot friends. We became friends over studying the Thoth, and this was the first deck that we that brought us together. And so it's special for me in that way. But in working with this deck as I have, I'm sorry about the dog barking. Okay. In working with this deck as I have, you can see that the character is the same female presenting character throughout the deck. And for me, this was amazing to see because of her body size and the way that her body is proportioned and large, and there are rolls, and it is not, you know, model-esque in the like conventional model-esque way. Not to say that there can't be or should not be models this size. But in any case, I saw my body and the body of women in my family in this deck, first of all. And so that was really amazing for me to see. But so that was just like, you know, first impressions before I got it. But getting this deck and working with this deck, this is the voice of my inner teenager. This deck, and like these, especially using it as an oracle alongside the tarot. I use it as both tarot and oracle, but I definitely pay attention to the oracle phrases at the top. This voice feels like a conversation with my inner teenager. This is one of my favorite tower cards ever. I love it especially because it can be taken as pain equals growing or pain is growing. Like, is it growing exponentially, or is pain the same thing as growing? Like, oh my God, that's amazing. And that's something that my teenage self would be like pondering constantly. So really, for me, it's really about this and the face of, so if you see, like, she has this like kind of edgy, kind of pissed off, kind of like, you know, attitude, angsty. Look at that. See, is that not like an angsty teenage face? It's just exactly who I feel like I'm talking to when I read with this deck. And it feels like it's a me, but it feels like my best friend too. It feels like we're, you know, we're having a sleepover and we're talking about all the stuff that's going on in our lives. And I mean, not to say that it's like at all, you know, like trivial or sophomoric. It's deep and personal and intimate, you know, readings and kind of conversation that I can have with this amazing deck. But it fully brings me to a space where I am connecting with, I love that High Priestess too, where I'm connecting with, you know, myself as a teenager, very much so, like dealing with angst and dealing with, you know, figuring myself out. But it's a very like, it's just that voice. It's just the voice of myself from that time period that I definitely connect with. So that, yeah, that's the Outgrow Yourself Tarot and Oracle. And so let me move on to another deck. And this is, so yeah, that's probably like my teenage self, like I would say like 16 to 18, like the Outgrow Yourself. So I'm going backwards now. My 16 to 18-year-old self, I would say, like the teenage self of mine that was like almost reaching adulthood, that is the Outgrow Yourself. My younger teenage self, like 13 to 15, when I was like just a baby freshman in high school and like, you know, starting out, is I get total teenage vibes from the Sun and Moon Tarot. First of all, and Mags Black brought this up because in the 90s, just because of the title, in the 90s, there was this like aesthetic, there was this like style of artwork, and it was on everything, like artwork, coffee mugs, plates, t-shirts, you know, bedspreads. Like it was a sun and moon, so like the sun and the moon together, and like this like kind of like celestial motif, and angels too, but like a celestial motif was a big deal in the 90s. And I most definitely had a t-shirt, a poster. I think I even had like a friend of mine drew like a sun and a moon merged together. And at that time I was convinced that the first tattoo I would get would be a sun and a moon face merged together. But yeah, so sun and moon, and this isn't, the imagery in the sun and moon isn't all sun and moon, but like, I feel like another one of the reasons why, so this is also a Thoth-based deck. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize that both of these, well, I have another one that's not Thoth-inspired. I don't think. But anyway, so this is the Sun and Moon Tarot. Let me stick to this. The Sun and Moon Tarot, like I really enjoy, and I think my Thoth study group I think everyone but me rehomed this deck, and I've stuck with it. It is, well, it's a melding of both the Thoth and the Rider-Waite-Smith, because you'll see the Thoth keywords, but some of the imagery really speaks to Rider-Waite-Smith. But for me, these characters look and feel like young adults to me, like pretty much teenagers. Maybe a little bit older than 13 to 15, but I don't know. They look to me like, they just look and feel to me like people I knew in the early 90s. That's one thing. And secondly, it doesn't call to my inner child in terms of its aesthetic, like oh my God, I'm the Lover's card. I love it. But anyway, it doesn't call to me, even though it's like cartoony type of artwork, in a like young child kind of way. It calls to me in a slightly more grown up child kind of way, in a young teenager. And I've found that unlike the Outgrow Yourself, which I definitely have used for like a calling me out on my shit kind of a deck, where I need to like deal with my angst and my, you know, just, I mean, I've used the Outgrow Yourself for many different things, but it has worked really well for like kind of just giving me straight talk. This deck is very like, it's just sweet, and it helps me. Like, it feels spiritual in a way that a young person figuring themselves out in their early teens can handle. Does that make sense? Do you guys understand what I mean? Like, when you're that young and you have so much, not to say that you can't, like, you know, have deep, meaningful thoughts and ideas. What I mean is, it's just like it helps me kind of process that stuff in the way that is like palatable to like, that doesn't overwhelm me too much, because I feel like that's what's happening when you're 13 to 15 years old. Like, things are way too much, can be way too much. And I obviously, like, I've worked with young people this age for quite some time too. So I really do connect to that time in a person's life. But it is, yeah, this deck, the Sun and Moon, it just feels like not too grown up, but also not too little kid. It feels like that space in the middle that helps me kind of like remember, it's a great moon card, that helps me like remember that person that I was, who was trying to like make my way through and figure out, you know, what I really believed in and who I loved, and, you know, what I loved and what I, you know, literally could manage day to day, and, you know, school and friends. I mean, life was 100% about, you know, friends and love, you know, at that time. And I mean, now, of course, I connect with it in a way that, like, I don't know, it just like helps me, it's just softer and balanced in a way that I enjoy now, even as an adult. Okay, and then I have two more to show you, and I'll try to go through this fast. The next one, it's a newer deck to my collection, and this is the Surrealist Tarot. Whoops, I had it backwards. The Surrealist Tarot. And I feel like the Surrealist Tarot speaks to me, it speaks to me across all my teenage years, because first of all, this deck is amazing. I absolutely love, I mean, I'm not an art expert, but I think I'm very much drawn to surrealist art. I am a fan of Salvador Dali. But anyway, the thing about this deck is there's so much to lose yourself inside. That's what, to me, teenagehood feels like. You can get so lost, and entering, it feels like, you know, I mean, at least maybe that's just me, but like there were times it just really felt like I was entering a dream. And you know, and also when I was a teenager was when I really developed my understanding of myself as a writer and a poet. And so this kind of artwork speaks to how I feel like I developed my voice in poetry. But in any case, like, I mean, this deck it's not just for inner teenager work, but I think it has worked well to speak to and reminds me of myself as a teenager. Because it is like it's grown up, but it's fucked up. Does that make sense? It's grown up, but it's like totally messed up, which is what being a teenager is like. It's so bizarre. It's, you know, surrealist art, right? You're trying to make sense of what's heads and tails, what's real, and it all just feels like made up, you know? And I feel like you walk through your teenage years that way. You can. I'm saying you in the general sense, and definitely I did. And I can't wait to use this deck more. I'm definitely going to use it for more than just talking to my inner teenager, but it really just gives me those inner teenager vibes. Okay, so that was the Surrealist Tarot. And then finally, I want to show you, like, in that same sort of vein. So this is the Poesis Oracle deck. I'll read the back to you just real quick. So Poesis is a collection of 77 cards that is designed to call us within when we have questions, trusting that we already have all the answers in the center of our being. Now, is that not like exactly what you're trying to do when you're in your teenage years? Like, figure yourself out, figure out what you believe, what's at your very heart and core. So this is an oracle deck. So it just has one keyword and the amazing artwork. This has also got like a very surrealistic vibe to it. It also has like kind of a more like cartoon-y, I hate to put words around art because I don't know what I'm talking about for real, but this is just the way that it makes sense to me. It's got kind of like, you know, cartoony. It's not too like super detailed, right? It's like approachable. I love that one. But anyway, this speaks to my inner teenager. Like, I would use this oracle deck. Like, oh my God, is that not perfect for somebody in their teens? I mean, it's perfect for lots of people, but for you in your teens, you know, when you're trying to figure out, like, oh my God, it's so much, you know, looking in the mirror that way. But anyway, I just feel like it could be like, I feel like it could be beneficial to teenagers to work with a deck like this, but I also think it's really valuable for me in terms of like reconnecting with that person that I was. And I have a very, you know, I'm feeling like, so I can tell you, you know, that I'm feeling very connected to the person that I was when I was a teenager, because she would be so absolutely thrilled to know that I have currently learned and am reading the tarot. Like, you know, that was the age that I was when I first purchased a tarot deck, and I didn't, you know, I didn't learn it then. But I think that my teenager self would be really happy to know that I came back to this path now in my life. So this oracle deck with its amazing like keywords, its simplicity, but it's like kind of dark, you know, even gothy, even though I wasn't really goth, kind of vibes. It also speaks to, you know, my poet self, who came to be really in my teenage years. Sorry about the dog again. Apparently something is really bothering him out there right now. But it really, yeah, it's just, I feel like this is a perfect deck to demonstrate, you know, my inner teenager. But it's really cool. Yeah, I just really feel this as a very, I don't know, just gives me those vibes of like my young self, you know, but in such a way that it connects to my old self now. And that just makes me really happy, you know? So yeah, I'm gonna end on that note, that I really overall, like, this topic was really fascinating to me because I, wanted to think about what my teenage self would think about where I am now, but also because I've really felt connected to my teenage self, and I feel like I've made some progress in work with, like, all of it could be considered inner child, but like that portion of time, that inner teenager portion of time, that feels like something that I've made some definite headway with in my tarot practice. So yeah, I would be really curious to know if you have done something similar, if you have an inner teenager voice that speaks to you, if there are decks that call to you that make you feel, connected to your inner teenager, or just have that vibe, or you think would be a good vibe for that, then I'd love to, hear about that as well. But yeah, thank you so much for sticking around with me through the end. I really appreciate it, and love, being able to share these random thoughts that come by with you all. So I hope that you all have a beautiful, wonderful day. Bye now.